follow the philosophy of letting 1,000 flowers bloom. So there are lots of little pockets all over campus that are focused on entrepreneurship. And when we can, we try to bring those groups together to perform or to create larger programs that are greater than the sum of their parts. And there are a few folks in the application development initiative that are entrepreneurial as well. But we work very closely with another student club called CORE, the Columbia Organization for Rising Entrepreneurs. So let me just give you a few examples of some of these larger programs that are greater than the sum of their parts. One of them is called the Columbia Startup Lab, and that is in Soho. Thank you, Max. That is in Soho. It is home for 71 recent alumni who are working full-time on their ventures. 71 alumni comprise about 40 different startups. Another huge program is called the Startup Columbia Festival. We have the founder of Snapchat coming here next Friday in Miller Theater, and we have a day-long conference. And in this room, 7 days from today, we will have the finals for the $250,000 business plan competition. So 15 very lucky entrepreneurs will be splitting that money and going off to do wonderful things. So now, without further delay, I will introduce our next speaker. We are very fortunate today to hear from Dale Dougherty. He is one of the foremost leaders of the Maker movement. Dale is the founder and CEO of MakerMedia, which produces magazine. Let me see that. This is what it looks like. A very, very well-produced publication, and really a catalyst for the worldwide Maker movement that has transformed innovation in industry, has transformed innovation in hands-on learning and education, and the lives of makers of all ages. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dale Dougherty to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here today. I want to talk to you about making, and it's somewhat in the context of school and education, but more broadly in our community and society. And you know, when you typically think of making, you think of hands-on and physical things, and that's certainly part of what it is. But I want to talk to you today that I think we don't give enough credit to what's going on in your mind when you're making and what happens, to that person. I think the real value of making is taking something that's in your head, developing it, and working on it, iterating over it, and then coming up with something that you can actually represent and share with other people. It is something that starts here and ends up through our hands into the physical world. It turns out that's really satisfying for us, and I don't completely know why, but it is a creative process. It's a design process, an engineering process. And actually, I would like you to think of making in terms of process more than product, and I'd like you to think of making not so much as a subject in school, but a process that can actually integrate almost any subject. And its interdisciplinary nature is part of its value. But part of it begins by recognizing that this is something that all of us can do. Every child is born a maker. They have it in them. They do it from birth. Sometimes we stop them from doing it. But you are a maker. Everyone in this room. You may have to go back to think about it as being a child, and it may help you become a child again. But all of us, every one of us, has some form, some talent for making. And many years ago, I had this thought. I said, I could ask some of you to identify yourselves as makers, and I'd get some of you in here. And I'd say that's not all of it, though. I think when I look at a class or I look at a group of people, it really is. This is something that all of us can enjoy doing and all of us can participate in. Not just some who have certain kinds of talents. So I want to talk to you today more about, I think, almost the emotions and the attributes that come from making, and what we see. This is at Pittsburgh at Maker Faire there. And, someone had created a spirograph out of these components. And a young girl who came to Maker Faire dressed up in a costume was riding it. And, it sort of gets all of the components here. But this basic engagement is why I think teachers are bringing making into schools. They see it. Kids get engaged around making, and they're not engaged enough in school. Making's playful. It's fun. It's personal. This young girl, this is, maybe we've been to the New York Maker Faire. Okay, we got some people that need to get you out there this year. This girl shows up to the Maker Faire in her own, gear. You can't quite see it, but she had dry ice in her backpack, so there was a trail of vapor following her. But she's from the future somewhere, we know, right? And it's a funny thing, but cosplay and costume making is a big thing in making, and it's playful, it's fun, and it's personal. It's also experimental. It's trying things. You don't know how they'll turn out. And I kind of say, even if someone, like if you're a cook, and someone says, here's a recipe. Well, you can't eat a recipe. You have to try it and make it and see if it actually tastes the way it looks and the way it sounds. And I think education needs to be more of that. Experiment. John Dewey and so many other figures of almost 100 years ago talked about this experimental process of learning. It's expressive. I think one of the reasons making is popular today, becoming popular, however you want to phrase it, is that, making is a platform for creative expression. We use a wide range of tools, some of them very new, like 3D printing. At the end of the day, it's expressive of some idea, something. This young man who's in the dinosaur costume came from Santiago, Chile, to our Bay Area Maker Faire. But he had walked into a makerspace one day and said, I want to make a dinosaur. And they had no idea what he was talking about, but he eventually got to work and figured out he was building kind of a wearable puppet figure. Another expressive but silly thing. This isn't a robot by any definition of academically of what a robot is, but kids get all around it, it has speakers on it, and makes noise, and the robot dances. And it's bringing something to life. It's creating something that other people can relate to. And I will say this, especially to educators, silly is a great place for kids to start. Don't ask them to be serious. Let them play. Let them do silly things. It is a way of engaging them and motivating them. So most of making is hands-on, and it's a very important thing. But I kind of want to get across to you that hands-on is also a metaphor. It's being engaged. It's being involved. The opposite of being hands-off means you're distant. You're away from something. And I think it turns out that actually being hands-on makes you a hands-on person around lots of things. It's experiential. Making is less about content and more about experience, particularly in an educational setting. How do we create experiential learning? How do we create the context where that happens? I personally, I'm not a teacher, so I get to say things to you that maybe if I were a teacher I wouldn't say to you. But I don't care what they learn. I care that they learn, and that they learn how to become a good learner. That comes to a set of experiences that are real world to them. Interactive. If you walk past a Maker Faire, most things are meant to be touched and interacted with you. Lights go off, sounds go off. And it's that sort of basic interaction that makers seem to want to, it's like a game, creating something that other people can play with. It's reflective. You look at things and understand them and appreciate them. You see you don't see things. Where'd that go? Precious. All right. Well, imagine. But I'm talking about sort of, I think think one of the values of making is to reflect on what you've done and to begin to put that together and figure out what did I learn by doing this. All right. Okay. Well, I will say, making is improvisational. You have to figure out what's next sometimes without knowing that. And there's a lot of sort of adjectives and words I could use to describe making here, and I might have to illustrate them with shadow play. But what we're seeing across America, if I go back about 5 years ago, I've been doing Maker Faire for about 11, and you could kind of think of Maker Movement as being about a dozen years old and things like that, but it's kind of, there we go. We got into education largely, not because the Department of Education said this is a good idea, they ignored it. It's coming in because teachers see the need for it, and teachers believe it has impact on kids. And if they can create joyful experiences for kids that are meaningful, that involve learning, they'll do that. It's inspirational. This is from the Bay Area Maker Faire. We had a fashion show, so wearable technologies and various things, but these are women wearing 3D printed prosthetics, not just as functional devices, but as fashion statements. They're saying, I look good in this. It's really hacking a fashion show. It's innovative. New ideas are coming out through makers and being expressed in the world. This is the InMove robot. It's created by a sculptor and designer from Paris. And he made it open source. And all the parts are 3D printed. So I go to maker fairs around the world and I see this robot because various communities have built it and want to do it. The hand became part of a prosthetic hand project, and people take it apart and use pieces of it. Making, I think, what is so exciting today is it's more than ever collaborative. It is not about someone working on their own in the back of their house. It's actually people working in maker spaces, working together, solving problems together, learning from each other. And it's that sort of mashup of resources and expertise that I think is making the power of the maker movement today. At its heart is this sharing. It's people creating something or people having skills that they can share with someone else. And I love so much of it's intergenerational. Older people sharing with younger people sharing with older people what they know how to do. I think this is a little bit hard for you, but making can be a little bit dangerous. It is sometimes on the edge. But I tell you, that's what that edge, just like skateboarding or surfing, that little bit of danger attracts kids. I want them to be safe. I'm not saying that. But being able to play safely with something that seems dangerous, and for that means a bicycle is dangerous, it's kind of important. You're learning to navigate something that's challenging. Another thing that's a problem for schools, it can be messy. But classrooms tend not to look orderly when making is going on. They actually look great. It's social. It brings family, community together. They can share and talk about making. And I believe the power of the maker movement today is because families also recognize this is something I can do with my kids and it's something I want my kids to do. Not just sit at an iPad and pop the screen, but actually engage with the physical world. And lastly on this maker is a kind of talent. And it maybe encompasses a broad range of talents. This young boy is at the Maker Faire in Washington, D.C., and he calls himself the Little Code Ninja. And he's like 7 or 8 years old. He wrote me a note saying, I've been to 5 Maker Fairs, and I teach classes to the blind and how to code. And he's figured out how to do a number of different things. But some of it's just the joy and in his face. So my goal in starting Maker Faire and seeing it develop was really to find a way to change consumer culture, if you will, to bring making back into the mainstream again as something that we believed was possible and important for us to do. And my initial idea is when people come to Maker Faire, they can see themselves as makers, not just consumers. To really see themselves as creative people that can come up with ideas and express them in new ways. It has led to, I think, a bringing back, a renaissance, really, of old ideas that we've forgotten, like learn by doing. It's not new. Who said that? You guys all know John Dewey, right? And it was his idea about how we learn from real world experiences, not from sort of artificial, not from being taught to, but by doing. And I think that the real difference around making is kids want to do it. It's not something we have to force them to do. We just enable them to do it. We create a context where they get to do it. Because we don't have to provide extrinsic rewards for it. Doing it itself is its own reward. Making is its own reward. We see ourselves in the things we make. In Japan, they make manga characters and with their 3D printer, and they're actually so creative in doing a lot. But what we do says something about who we are in a safe and interesting way. It makes us happy. We feel good when we're making. And I will take that to the bank all day long, because once we enjoy something, we will try to keep doing it. But I think the benefit of making is not just that you become talented and have a certain skill set. It's actually that you have a mindset. And it is a mindset, first of all, that you can do things, a sense of agency. But it's also a mindset of being resourceful, resilient, that you can figure out how to learn how to do something. It's represented in school, I think, by being more of a self-directed learner rather than someone's being told what to do and how to do it. And I think that mindset comes not because we tell kids that's something they should aspire to. It comes from the practice of making. It comes from doing it and trying it and failing and all those kind of exercises. And I'd like you to think in particular in the educational context of making as a practice. And there's a lot of good analogies to that, but sports is one of them. You as educators are more like coaches than players, right? You don't get on the football field and play the sport. You coach kids through a practice to get them to help them become better at what they're doing, help them become aware of how they're playing. But the game, in this case making, is something they have to do. They have to have control over. They have to have a sense of agency. Not to be told what to do, but to be doing it themselves. Bruner, an educational theorist, used this phrase to talk about what he believed real, authentic learning was, and he called it deep immersion in a consequential activity. And I think that's the two parts of that immersion, that we have to fight for, that's hard in a school setting, is giving kids more time to do stuff. Let them lose themselves in play and expanding out to do that. It's hard, I understand, but that's where the benefits come. Not because you did a 5-minute hands-on activity, but because you had an idea and you tried something and it didn't work and you tried it again and then you talked to a friend and got another idea and you worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And a consequential activity, it meant something, it changed something because you did it, right? And it was different at the end than at the beginning. Now this mindset thing, I've sent a book by Dr. Kelly Lambert called Lifting Depression. She'd seen me somehow, and she said, I think you should read my book, because I did talk about the maker mindset and that. And she teaches at George Mason University as a psychologist and neuroscientist. Her mother passed away, and she began to experience depression. And as she tells the story, she was kind of feeling listless, she wasn't motivated, she couldn't do what she did normally. And one day she started vacuuming. And she said, I hate to clean the house, but vacuuming actually was a physical activity, and it sort of engaged me in a way that surprised me and actually helped me get out of my depression. Not just vacuuming, but it was a start, it was a signal that she heard. And she came up in her book with this idea of an effort-driven reward circuit. And basically, her idea is that the brain and the hand are connected more fully than any other part of the body. If you want to look at how our hands are wired to our brain, disproportionately our hands have more connections to the brain than our legs, our feet, anything else. When our hands are active, our mind is activated. Our motivation, our pleasure circuits are connected. And as she started to explain this, I kind of had this idea that the opposite of the maker mindset is not just boredom, but it's depression. It's something that when you can't affect an outcome, when you don't believe your actions matter, that reads, like depression. Whereas when you're engaged and doing things and active and purposeful, it reads more like the maker mindset. So she said what revs up the effort during a reward circuit is the fuel is generated by doing certain types of physical activities, especially ones that involve your hands. But we, as a culture, kind of deprecate using our hands. We've kind of made education so efficient that I don't need to do the exercise. I can just tell them what would happen. But it turns out that engagement, that hands-on piece, is how we learn and how we feel about how we learn. So, I kind of want to make this point here to you that hands-on making changes how our brain works and creates a sense of well-being. There's science behind it. It isn't just my idea. If you want to explain why this is important, look at the kids in the classroom who are bored and maybe even depressed and say, what could I do for them? How could I engage them? How could I get them a sense that they are moving and going somewhere and doing things that matter to them, engaged in a consequential activity? Marshall McLuhan said, we shape our tools and our tools shape us, which is a good way of thinking about that dialogue between the things in a makerspace and what's going on in our heads. Right? When you learn to use a 3D printer, it's not that it's the most important learning tool of our day. It's not. But it gets you to think about what's possible to do. It changes how you think. And that's really what interests me here. It changes us, and it changes the world around us. We have impact on even the small scale. And I believe that it allows us to project, to think about what the future is, what that future will be, and how we have a role in shaping it. And I have to say, there's one hallmark for me of thinking about what the maker movement is about, is I want this world that's increasingly driven by science and technology not to be defined and administered by technocrats, but to be collaboratively created, co-created, with all of us participating. Not some of us blaming the other people who did it, that they didn't do it right, but all of us taking ownership, and all of us participating, and creating a culture and creating a world that we want to live in. So I'd like to close, almost close anyway, with this is a short clip of Maker Faire in the Bay Area. It comes up in about 4 weeks. And it's our largest fair. It's about 150,000 people over 2 days. It's pretty incredible. For those of you who haven't been to one, it'll give you some taste of it, a little bit the spectacle of it more than anything. Making is so basic and fundamental to who we are that all of us are makers. It's not just some special group who went to the right school. It is something that's in all of us, and it's something that's very broadly available in our culture.
Anything that you need to make, it's important that you make it. Humans do two things that make us unique from all other animals. We use tools and we tell stories. And when you make something, you're doing both at once.
Today's DIY is tomorrow's Made in America. Your projects are examples of a revolution that's taking place in American manufacturing. A revolution that can help us create new jobs and industries for decades to come.
Makers are a source of innovation. I think it relates back to something like the birth of the personal computer industry. This is Steve Wozniak. where does he learn about computers? It's the Homebrew Computer Club, just like Hackerspace. And he says, I can go there all day long and talk to people and share ideas for free.
You're telling a story about your desire, you're telling a story about something that you want, you're telling a story about something that you see needs to be made, and you are using your tools to improve yourself and improve the world around you.
If you can imagine it, then you can do it, whatever it is. This is a country that imagined a railroad connecting a continent, imagined electricity powering our cities and towns, imagined skyscrapers reaching into the heavens, an internet that brings us closer together. So we imagine these things, then we did it. And that's in our DNA, that's who we are.
Okay. So, those of you that don't know a lot about this, the Maker movement is spread around the world. Last year there were 150 Maker Fairs in Asia and Europe. And we had about 90 fairs in the U.S. Our largest one was in the Bay Area, but about over 200,000 people physically came to a Maker Faire this year. A couple weekends ago, I was in Cairo. We had Maker Faire Cairo in Egypt for the second year, and it's incredible to see, a young population that really there, suffers from a particularly bad economy and political climate, and they look at the Maker movement as a sign of hope. Something that they can do, something they can get involved in and make a difference. So last year, one of my favorite Maker Fairs, perhaps my favorite, took place in Wenatchee. It was the first one organized by a high school student. He went to the Seattle Maker Faire, Ethan Toth is his name, and he came back to his high school and said, our town needs a Maker Faire, and I'm going to create one as my senior project. And he said he saw himself as a creative person, but there weren't places in town for him to create, that he couldn't do it at school. So he went out in the community, found creative people, got them to a Maker Faire, and he went to the city government, went to the university, got them all involved. And when they came together, they said, this is something we should support as a community, and they began to build maker spaces. But it was the first one really organized by high school students, and I'd love to see all of you think about, doing school Maker Fairs. We have a program where you go to makerfaire.com/schools and get a playbook on how to do a Maker Faire. Just sign up. We just like to know that you're doing it. We had 80 in 6 months last year, and since we launched the program, but it was largely because people were already doing it. You're doing it, right? And it is, in some ways, bringing a breath of fresh air to what science fairs have been, including more kinds of things and more fun and creativity on display. So, what you have as an asset here is not necessarily, a STEM agenda or a, Department of Education or even a formal curriculum. What you have is a community of people, educators like you, makers of all kinds, who are accessible to you in different ways. Some in your backyard, some in your school district, some online, and some in other countries. And they're all learning and making and sharing. So I invite you to join us, join a movement, and become part of something that I think has, and it already is in small ways, beginning to transform education, transform our society, and transform how we think about ourselves. Thank you very much.